Number 10. Ultimate Red Skull. Ultimate Red Skull is not a hero, but hey, guess what? This isn't a superhero list, it's a character list. So it's still super appropriate for me to be including him here. Why do we love him? Because he is a complex villain with an insane backstory and origin. Ultimate Red Skull is called such because he hails from the ultimate reality of Earth 1610, with its own comic line that literally saved Marvel back in the early 2000s, breathing new and fresh lifeblood into the company by getting people excited to read comics again. Many characters as such were changed, as this line was basically free from the normal bogged down 616 continuity, which for some was actually intimidating to dip into because of years and years of previous continuity. I know myself, when I started reading comics, I was also intimidated. Ultimate Red Skull is one of these characters that was completely revamped. In this version of the tale, he is actually Steve Rogers' son, being the son of both Captain America and his fiancée at the time, Gail Richards. After Steven went MIA while on a mission, becoming frozen in the ice, Gail was convinced to give up their baby to the American government for the child's protection, or so she was told. In reality, the US military simply wanted to train the boy to be like his father, hoping to acquire another super soldier after the loss of Rogers. However, this backfired, as the boy became resentful of his absent father and his accomplishments, as well as those who were holding him, and escaped, becoming the villain known as Red Skull. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, and if you love characters that are just underappreciated like I do, be sure to check out our weirdest playlist, because I feel like weird characters are often also that. Number 9. Young Cable. Young Cable! I mean, I love all forms of Cable really, but Young Cable or Kid Cable is definitely one of my favorite versions. And while Cable is back, Young Cable basically swapped out spots with him for this to be so. Kind of breaks my heart, because this happened after I was really beginning to fall in love with the character via Phil Noto and Jerry Dugan's Cable series. I haven't talked about this series in some time, but it truly was one of my favorites from the current X-Men line. And if Young Cable isn't enough to pique your interest, it also has Space Knights and the Stepford Cuckoos peppered throughout as well, and just good old Summers family bonding, which we all enjoy. So there is definitely something in there that I'm sure would draw you in, and then of course, like me, you'll probably also fall in love with the character. This might be a controversial one to include though, considering many were not a fan of the character when he first arrived on the scene, seemingly closing his own time loop by killing his older self, which is, you know, why a lot of fans are not here for Kid Cable. But trust me when I say this series will make you a fan, and like me, will probably also make you miss him, like me wanting to have him back in the comics sooner rather than later, but probably will have to wait for some time. Number 8. Trinary. Trinary is another hero that I love who recently fell by the wayside in the comics, and I was really enjoying reading X-Corp too, which I wanted it to be an ongoing, but it was only a mini. Why did this happen? The team and series that Trinary was a part of. Shilpa Khatri is a relatively new character over at Marvel who first appeared in 2018 in X-Men Red issue number 1. She is a mutant whose powers allow her to control technology. Although, to hear Trinary explain it, it's less her bending tech to her will and more like her having a conversation with technology and making requests which are happily carried out. In other words, it seems like her technopathy abilities are more like Cypher's when it comes to technology. She can communicate with the tech, and generally they want to help Trinary because they like her. Shilpa initially gained the attention of the X-Men as a mutant when she used her powers to balance some of the wealth in India, taking from 25 of the highest earning CEOs' bank accounts to basically give funds to every single working woman in the country, which I also personally am like, balancing it out, balancing out the money. Number 7. Moon Girl. Moon Girl is ranking a little lower on this list because although I love Luna and I do think that she deserves more time in the spotlight, having recently been declared officially by Marvel as one of their all-time smartest superheroes, she also did just get a new series, and she even got a show on Disney Plus along with her pal Devil Dinosaur. Luna Lafayette is just an inspiring character, and that's why I still think she deserves a place on our list and deserves even more time in the spotlight. Although she is finally coming back into the spotlight now, there was a long time when she was very much out of it. I'm excited though to see her coming back into the mainstream and to get so much attention, and I want to in part thank Marvel Snap possibly for some of what's happening with her now, who also really did her and Devil Dino justice with the cards that they made for both of them in the game. I think both Moon Girl series could even be attracting new readers and viewers thanks to her card in the game, which pairs insanely well with Devil Dinosaur when used correctly. Like, the two of them together in Marvel Snap are really a pretty OP duo. Number 6. Talisman. Talisman is an amazing character, and one, like many Alpha Flight members, that we simply do not get enough of in the comics. She is the daughter of Shaman, Dr. Michael II Youngman, and like many daughters who have come before her and after her in the comics, I feel she has been a little bit snubbed somewhat throughout her history. Like her father, Elizabeth is also a pretty rad character with multiple layers. She has a strained relationship with her father and the death of her mother, which happened when she was young. Both Elizabeth and Michael suffered as a result of her loss, with Elizabeth blaming her father and her father, Michael, also pretty much blaming himself. Despite their strained relationship, however, Elizabeth would eventually reach out to her father, and the mysticism that stretched back through their family history would also be shown to influence her, with her being revealed as the powerful figure Talisman, with her getting much of her power from the coronet, or talisman if you prefer, of power. Number 5. Ultimate Modi. When it comes to the ultimate reality, there are so many amazing characters that deserve more time in the spotlight. One of them is the son of Thor and Hela. Now, before you freak out, a friendly reminder that in the comics, Hela is not Thor's sister, but is his niece. And before you freak out from that revelation, a friendly reminder that in the Ultimate Comics line, Hela's origins are simply that she is basically death personified. So, no direct relation to Thor that we know of, although there is something pretty creepy to be said about their relationship, other than the fact that Thor was manipulated into sleeping with Hela in exchange for basically helping his love Valkyrie. She's had her eyes on him ever since he was really young, which is disturbing. But I guess if, she's death personified, at any point in his life this becomes creepy because, by comparison, she's very ancient. Modi is their son together, and he is interesting in the sense that he likely served somewhat as an inspiration for the MCU version of Loki. Thor even at one point in the comics mistakes him for Loki, not recognizing his son now that he is all grown up, after having left him in the World Tree to basically grow up alone, for Modi's own protection. But of course, Modi wasn't really fixated on that part of the whole leaving him alone to grow up. Modi is interesting because he never really seems to have had a close connection with either of his parents, and we see him probably do the most bonding with his uncle Loki. This might also be why he ends up as more of a villain in the story, although his mom is also Hela, so that may have also had an influence on him. Number 4. Photon. Monica Rambeau is, I feel like, just beginning to get some of her due in modern comics. She recently got her own series titled Photon, and we are finally going to see her on the big screen when she appears in the Marvels, which will be about Miss Marvel, Captain Marvel, and of course, Monica Rambeau, who I imagine will be known as well in the MCU as Photon. I feel like Monica is a character who has been snubbed consistently throughout her history. She was the first female Captain Marvel who was forced to give up the name when Marvel's son, Genisvel, wanted to use the name for himself, which I guess he is Captain Marvel's son, but still. She was also at one point a leader of the Avengers team, but was pretty quickly nerfed after a team-up attack with Thor backfired, leaving her weak and on the mend. She was then manipulated by the evil Dr. Druid into giving up her place as team leader. Monica is an amazingly powerful character who also really has a strong sense of right and wrong. She is a fantastic character who also has such a rich history and origin, working for the New Orleans Harbor Patrol initially as a lieutenant before a freak accident that happened on duty resulted in her getting powers. Number 3. Quasar. I might be the only one who misses Quasar, but lately, I don't know, I've just been thinking about him a lot, and he is most definitely a character who I think does not get enough love, especially currently in the modern comics. I was even looking up Quasar the other day, and I could only find a recent appearance of him from about 2 years ago in Guardians of the Galaxy. That has been too long, in my opinion. I first fell in love with the character of Wendell Vaughn in the Dazzler series, where he was introduced to me through Project Pegasus, being really one of the few friends Dazzler had after she was intercepted by them and volunteered herself, and her powers for further study. Eventually, Dazzler would try to leave the facility without being dismissed, becoming suspicious of the scientific minds that were holding her there and basically resentful of them. During her escape, she would accidentally use her powers to seemingly kill the villain Ulysses Claw, who was also being held for study. Through this, Wendell would remain a friend of Dazzler and would even come to testify at her trial when she was forced to face the music and was basically sued by Pegasus for the damage done to Project Pegasus and the apparent accidental murder of Claw, who was in their custody, so Yeah. Number 2, Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is one of those characters that I really think deserves so much more attention. He is just such a powerful and interesting figure, and he does not get enough time to shine in the comics. Blue Marvel is Adam Brashear, known for being super smart, super powerful, and kind of super old. Although he doesn't look like it, thanks to his superpowers, of course. Blue Marvel was actually retconned to have been a hero way back in the 60s. He became a hero after the negative reactor experiment he was working on went wrong. He and his scientific team were hoping to bridge the gap between the negative zone and the physical plane in a hope to harness basically antimatter energy. However, the reactor during a test exploded. Did it explode or did it implode? It did one of those things. And combined with Adam, turning him into a living, breathing negative reactor. I don't think he actually has to breathe though, but the fact remains that he became in essence a superhero as a result of this explosion or implosion. He would go on to fight crime in the US, but would basically be asked to step down by the president after being celebrated for his accomplishments thus far, as a result of the intense racial tension in the country at the time. He's got a fascinating past and is an extremely interesting and powerful character, in essence having powers to rival those of basically DC's Superman. So why we don't talk about him more, I don't know. Maybe he's too powerful. Is that the problem? Number 1, Dazzler. For those who are new to the channel, I love Dazzler. And for those of you who have been around for a while, I'm sure Daz taking my top spot comes as a surprise to basically no one. I personally am generally a big fan of the characters who are less well known and seem to kind of just like fly under the radar. I think it's because I've always felt some kinship with them, because although they are great and amazing, they might not be as popular or as celebrated among like all fans. In a way, I think this reflects the way that I kind of see myself. Like, I'm pretty cool, but I also feel like because I enjoy celebrating kind of like my little quirks, I'll never really be someone who is mainstream popular because I don't necessarily like fit into neat boxes. Dazzler's also one of those characters. With someone like Dazzler, it's kind of the same thing that she has going on, both on the page to readers and I would say in canon in her own life. Dazzler is a mutant, but she's never really been super passionate about using her powers like so many others to be your typical hero. Instead, she's more interested in using her powers to entertain and bring joy to people through the power of her music and her live performances. She's like one of those, you know, just everyday heroes. She's like, I just want to entertain people and do that, and in that way she's heroic, and then she gets pulled into stuff and she's still like, oh dang, I need to like figure this out now, and she always thinks through it, I feel like a real person would.
At number 10, it's kind of obvious, Aquaman. One might overlook the depths of appreciation for Aquaman within the Justice League. Sure, his capability to communicate with marine life might seem pretty niche, but let's reel in the bigger picture. The oceans cover about 70% of our planet, harboring uncharted territories and mysteries. Aquaman isn't just some guy who talks to fish. He's the bridge between those two worlds, a literal middle ground between humanity and the mysterious deep. His trident isn't just a fancy fork, you guys. It controls tides, wields immense power, and symbolizes authority. I mean, just think about it. The Justice League isn't just about battling supervillains, it's also about safeguarding Earth's entire spectrum, both above and below the waves. So perhaps it's finally time we give Aquaman the recognition he deserves for his role as an unsung guardian of not just our cities, but also our oceans. If you're enjoying the video so far, you can support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. I really appreciate it. At number 9, Dr. Light. Dr. Light, no, not the villainous one. We're shining a light on Kimiyo Hoshi, the heroic version. During Crisis on Infinite Earths, Hoshi got a cosmic power-up courtesy of the Monitor. But she didn't just twiddle her thumbs after that. Oh no, she actually joined forces with John Kent's League. Fast forward to a mission with Damian Wayne where her true potential ignited. She latched onto her powers like a life buoy in the sea of trouble, seizing the Great Darkness's link to the Dark Army. And using her cosmic juju, she was able to keep the wonky multiverse in check. Like, imagine the multiverse like a Jenga tower on a shaky table. That's Dark Crisis for you. But thanks to Dr. Light's intervention, that tower stood up tall. At number 8 is Martian Manhunter. When it comes to the Justice League, we often find ourselves focusing on the big names like the iconic Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman, but let's not forget about the underrated gem in the lineup, Mr. Martian Manhunter. John Johns, as he's known on his Mars block, boasts an impressive record. He's been a steadfast member since the League's inception, inception, a fact that might even surprise the most dedicated fans of the superhero world. While he took a brief hiatus to deal with his own rogues gallery in Metropolis, Martian Manhunter proved his mettle when the chips were down. The Dark Army threat called him back into action alongside his super buddies, and there he stood, resolute and ready. In an ultimate showdown, he, like other heroes, met his quote-unquote demise, only to triumph through the chaos, showing us that his place was never in question. John Johns, the shape-shifting, telepathic powerhouse, truly deserves a spotlight among Earth's mightiest heroes. At number 7 is John Constantine. Enter John Constantine, the unassuming yet pivotal member of the Justice League. Nestled within the DC universe, his mastery over the arcane and his sharp wit are his greatest assets. Constantine's recent exploits with the Justice League Dark demonstrates his prowess in thwarting even the most menacing of adversaries. His instrumental role in quelling Merlin's Earth-threatening havoc showcased his resourcefulness. But it's not just about the supernatural. When the cataclysmic onslaught by Pyrrha on the multiverse unraveled, Constantine's significance truly shone. United with the League's unconventional champions, he orchestrated a daring expedition into the Starheart. This voyage unearthed the elusive ties between Pyrrha and the looming Great Darkness, unraveling a truth vital to preserving the cosmos. So without Constantine's calculated audacity, the unraveling of this intricate tapestry might have remained an unrealized endeavor. At number 6 is Detective Chimp. Detective Chimp, a seemingly unconventional member of the Justice League Dark, often flies under the radar. Nestled within DC's magical realm, Detective Chimp's inclusion might appear puzzling at first glance, yet he's a strategic asset with a rich history. Having intertwined with the Shadow Pact, he actively combated the Spectre and assumed leadership. His saga continued as he merged into the JLD, significantly contributing to toppling the enigmatic Upside Down Man. Engagements against mystical adversaries like Merlin and Xanadoth further underscore his prowess. What's remarkable is that Detective Chimp lacks innate magic. His power lies in his encyclopedic insights and deductive prowess. A nonchalant chimp on a couch with a beer might not scream hero, but this tale resonates with the essence of heroism, leveraging what you possess in unexpected ways. At number 5 is Black Canary. DC's trove of superhero houses some major players, yet few shine as brilliantly as Black Canary. Striding confidently in her signature leather jacket and fishnets, she exudes a unique aura. A formidable Justice League member, she's no stranger to clashing with villains like the Royal Flush Gang and Xanadoth. Do any of you nerds remember the Pyrrha incident? Well, it didn't end well, and thanks to Barry Allen, she returned to the fray. At number 4 is Zatanna. DC Comics is a realm brimming with Caped Crusaders and superpowered saviors, and harbors an array of mystical manipulators, none more captivatingly enigmatic than Zatanna. When the formidable Wonder Woman found herself momentarily absent, it was Zatanna who gracefully shouldered the mantle of command, guiding the Justice League Dark. Her pivotal role in orchestrating the League's standoff against the sinister Merlin can't be understated. Amidst all this arcane chaos, she deliberately relinquished control, a calculated gambit that culminated in Merlin's undoing. But this was merely the tip of her metaphysical iceberg. See, Zatanna emerged as a linchpin in the League's conquest against the formidable Xanadoth, locking horns with Pyrrha and his nefarious Dark Army. With unwavering mettle, she showcased why she deserved the crown of the League's unsung champion. Throughout all of last year, Zatanna became omnipresent, an indomitable force safeguarding the multiverse, and an unsung sentinel shaping destinies with every uttered incantation. At number 3 is Hippolyta. Hippolyta is a formidable Amazonian warrior, proud and strong. Her introduction into the Justice League as a beacon of hope and might was anticipated by many. But alas, the anticipation doesn't always translate into reality. You see, Hippolyta's presence within the League remained akin to a whisper in the tempest, overshadowed by the cosmic machinations of Perpetua and the enigmatic Batman who laughs. But fear not, for every star has its moment to gleam. Enter Wonder Woman Historia, a tapestry woven in the loom of imagination. Within its pages, Hippolyta emerges not as a mere figure in the background, but as a central force. We traverse her ancient battles, her defiance against mighty Zeus, and her valiant struggle to emancipate women from their tormentors. In this alternate avenue, Hippolyta illuminates the narrative with deserved radiance, proving that even obscured stars can blaze anew. At number 2 is Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman, a symbol of strength and justice who has been a cornerstone of the Justice League, yet her pivotal role often goes unnoticed. In 2022, her journey across the multiverse and involvement in the trial of the Amazons showcased her resilience. Stepping back from leading the Justice League Dark, she aided both the leagues against the formidable Xanadoth, and notably, her contribution in the showdown against Pyrrha and the Dark Army stuck out. Rescued by Barry Allen, she emerged in the final battle, emphasizing her unwavering commitment. Although in this series her time in the League was limited, the quality of her actions spoke volumes. volumes. Wonder Woman's return marked a turning point, spotlighting her often underrated significance in safeguarding the League and the broader universe. And at number 1 is Green Arrow. Green Arrow often finds himself lurking in the shadows of the limelight, but let's not underestimate the gravity of his contributions. So you see, 2022 was a really good year for Green Arrow. Not content with mere archery prowess, he silently bankrolled the League's operations, an unsung hero in the financial realm. When the Royal Flush Gang and Xanadoth posed threats, there he stood, bow drawn, ready for action. His devotion went beyond the battlefield. When Black Canary was summoned to the Hall of Heroes, uninvited was he, yet a resolute in companionship. Pyrrha's ominous Dark Army meets its match, and eventually Pyrrha's ominous Dark Army met its match as the battle ensued. Yet it was Green Arrow's sacrifice that tipped the scales, obliterating Pyrrha's machinery and securing triumph. It just goes to show that superhuman strength isn't always about flashy costumes and booming catchphrases, so the next time you find yourself pondering the capabilities of these unsung heroes, let's remember that sometimes it's the quieter, less celebrated members who possess astonishing abilities beyond what meets the eye. And as we continue to unravel the mysteries of the superhero world, let's always keep that sense of wonder alive, because you never know what incredible feats might be lurking just around the corner, ready to amaze us.
Number 10. Mantis. Mantis actually got her start in comics when she used her abilities to reform Swordsman or Jacques Duquesne, which actually got her into the Avengers. Mantis's powers and abilities are more than what you may have gathered from her film counterpart. Mantis has complete control over her entire body, which in turn gives her peak human agility, the ability to accelerate healing through force of will, and an empathic nature enabling her to communicate telepathically with and sense the emotions of others as psychic vibrations. She can also control her heart and respiratory rate and blood flow as well. Her mastery of the Kotati priest's martial arts, which focuses on the manipulation of nerve endings and pressure points, has enabled her to knock out beings as powerful as Thor, and her telepathic and empathic abilities are improved upon thanks to the 2 little antennae that she has coming out of her head. But it doesn't stop there though. Mantis also gained abilities when she merged with the Kotati, such as being able to communicate with both plants and animals, and survive in space in a physically solid energy form. She can transfer herself from plant life to plant life across interstellar distances or even dimensions, creating a new body from the plant life wherever she ends up. She can transmit and receive telepathic impressions, she has precognitive powers, and more recently, she can fire powerful pyrokinetic energy blasts from energy fields, communicate directly with cosmic beings such as eternity and death, and completely control her personal energies as well as her physical form. I don't want to keep talking about it anymore. Number 9. Hawkeye. Clint Barton is essentially just a regular human man, but despite that, and likely because of his abilities and talents, he is considered a power level 4 according to Nick Fury's intel, whatever that means. Those aforementioned abilities include being a master of archery in the use of regular bows, longbows, compound bows, and crossbows, with basically perfect accuracy, able to fire multiple arrows at a single target in just a few seconds, hitting multiple targets in a few quick strokes, and directly hitting small targets at the greatest of distances. But he now also has near perfect precision with any aimed or thrown weapon. He is at the peak level of human eyesight possible, is in peak athletic human condition with peak strength, endurance, and reflexes. He's an expert acrobat, tactician, and master martial artist, but just listing off his abilities isn't going to give you a proper understanding of how cool Hawkeye is. So what has he done? In Avengers Volume 3, number 14, Hawkeye was cornered by 17 marksmen and took them all down without taking a single life. And in Hawkeye Volume 4, number 1, Clint ran into a wanted criminal in a bar and took him down silently, somehow fracturing his neck with a deck of cards. I don't know. Number 8. Tigra. When Greer Nelson first came on the scene, she was just known as the Cat, and was given powers tied to her costume. But that all changed when she became Tigra, or Tigra, however you want to pronounce it. Mutating into a human-tiger hybrid in a ritual that bound her to the, quote, cat people, which while it may be a silly name, was a race of humanoid cats who were created in the Middle Ages, so cat people. Now, before you laugh at her for looking silly, just know that in her tiger form, Tigra is granted some useful abilities. Her superhuman strength allows her to lift over 10 tons with her leg muscles, allowing her to perform a standing jump of 12 feet. She can run at speeds of around 70 miles per hour, has superhuman durability, agility, reflexes, and stamina, and as we all know, cats have heightened senses and like to knock things off of wherever you carefully place them. And as far as I know, the former is still the same with tigra, whose senses are about 10 times that of a human's. Tigra's eyesight can sense the infrared portion of the electromagnetic spectrum, allowing her for night vision. She can more easily detect the movements of an opponent. Her hearing is so strong that she can detect a ball of tissue paper being dropped at a distance of 40 feet, just like every other cat, and her sense of smell is so developed she can selectively sort through odors just to track someone. Number 7. Shang-Chi. Shang-Chi is one of, if not the greatest martial artist on Earth. He was trained from birth to become the ultimate warrior. He can take on multiple opponents at once and can even defeat people much more superhumanly powerful than he is. In fact, in the White Hot Room, when the Phoenix organized a tournament to pick who would be the new host, the only reason that Shang-Chi lost was because he refused to take someone's life, having him expelled from that tournament. He is particularly skilled in Chinese martial arts, but his skill branches out to many other forms of martial arts as well. In one case, he even worked with Spider-Man to create a new martial art based on Peter's powers. Shang-Chi also is able to manipulate Chi energy, which he can use to enhance his strength and durability, and can even detect others based on their energy, like he did when he detected a psionically masked Jean Grey. But Shang-Chi gets a much more significant boost of power when he's using the 10 rings. He can use those rings as projectiles, manipulate their size, and use them to levitate or even fly. The rings grant the martial master superhuman strength, durability, speed, and stamina, and he can even manipulate the energies from the rings to do many other things as well. And then, just to top it all off, thanks to the other side of his heritage, Shang-Chi inherited his mother's psionic abilities to communicate with his blood relatives, even the deceased ones. Freaky. Number 6. Jack of Hearts. Jonathan Hart is a hero you may not have heard of, or maybe you have, I don't know. What I do know is that Jack Hart was the son of a brilliant scientist, a scientist that created the ridiculously efficient liquid sci-fi fuel called Zero Fluid. In a tragic comic book backstory, that fluid was exposed to Jack and it gave him his awesome but difficult to control abilities. Importantly, he was also part alien, with his mother hailing from the Contraxian race. Now, due to his cellular mutation that took place after his Zero Fluid exposure, Jonathan Hart is now able to produce pink concussive energy beams and blasts from his hands and body, taking up the incredibly clever name of Jack of Hearts. Jack of Hearts can use his zero energy blast to fly at speeds currently not specifically known, but he has flown halfway across the United States in 3 minutes flat, which is pretty fast. His biological structure was reformed to basically give him the superhuman starter pack abilities, but his strength has been able to lift 25 tons. He has enhanced speed, stamina, healing factor, and durability, able to withstand some pretty heavy hits and survive in the vacuum of space. He also went through another mutation which gave him the ability to think as fast as a computer can, which is really cool, and he can retain and retrieve stored information from deep recesses of his brain, which is also really cool. Number 5. Blue Marvel. Adam Brashear, a former Marine and scientist turned superhero, stands as one of Marvel Comics' most formidable heavyweights. Not only does he have immense physical strength, but he also ranks among the most brilliant minds in the Marvel Universe. He's an underutilized character who happens to be one of my personal favorites. His origin story unfolds in the tumultuous 1960s amid a groundbreaking project centered on utilizing antimatter as an energy source. However, an unforeseen explosion during the experiment forever changed Adam and his close friend, Connor. The cataclysmic event transformed Adam into a living, stable antimatter reactor, giving him extraordinary superhuman abilities. Embracing his powers, he assumed the mantle of the Blue Marvel, a masked hero dedicated to safeguarding the world, but tragically, Connor's fate took a darker turn as he became Anti-Man, a villain. Their epic clashes reached a climax during one unforgettable battle when the Blue Marvel's mask was torn away, revealing his identity as an African-American hero. In the racially charged climate of the 1960s America, President John F. Kennedy urged him to retire prematurely to alleviate tensions. It wasn't until decades later that he came back as a full-on superhero and kicked some serious butt in the Avengers. Number 4. Sersi. Sersi is a member of the Eternals, an evolutionary offshoot of humanity gifted with amazing powers and abilities to look after the human race through the ages, which is similar but also just a smidgen bit different from the Eternals' movie counterparts. As an Eternal, Sersi's body is augmented by cosmic energy and she has total mental control over her entire molecular structure, which allows her and other Eternals to be immortal, indestructible, and invulnerable to pretty much anything. Sersi has enough strength to bench 20 tons, but thanks to her telekinesis, she can augment that to lift about 25 tons. She can also fly at around 760 miles per hour, which is, I don't know about you, but I think that's pretty dang fast. She can project cosmic energy, has telepathy that allows her to hypnotize weak-minded fools, but she can also teleport, but she hates it, and she is even able to project images from her mind, which is such a cool idea for an ability. Those are all the powers that we don't see in the Eternals movie, because arguably the ability she has the most talent in is her matter transmutation ability, which allows Cersei to transmute nearly any item or being into almost whatever she wants them to be. Among the Eternals, she has the highest ranking of power with this ability, and it allows her to self-heal any injury she does actually sustain, which aren't many because she's awesome. Number 3, Luke Cage. Criminal turned unstoppable superhero is quite the feat, but Luke Cage handles that with grace, becoming a pillar of his community and even eventually becoming mayor of New York itself. Whenever I think of Luke Cage, the word unstoppable is what actually comes to mind. I just think of him as this big brick wall just standing in the way of anyone who would try to harm anyone else. Luke went through a super soldier experiment known as the Burstein process, which increased his cellular regeneration rate. This means that Luke was given a level of super strength that, with training and experience, has made him strong enough to lift 50 tons. But there have been times where he's exceeded that, and this strength lets him perform thunderclaps, leap incredible distances, and he's been able to grab onto the back of an aeroplane and force it to come to a complete stop. That is nuts. Alongside his strength, he was obviously given superhuman stamina to match with that, but most know him for his nigh invulnerability. Luke's skin, muscles, and bone tissue are about as hard as titanium steel, making him basically immune to bullets and blades. He can withstand hits of around 1 ton and blasts of 150 pounds of TNT, but those numbers wax and wane depending on the story. He has taken hits from people far stronger than himself and survived falls from 90 stories up. If Peter Parker is the heart of New York, Luke Cage is basically like the wall. Number 2, Wasp. Traditionally, the Wasp has been considered one of the less powerful members of the Avengers. Her unique abilities, which include shrinking, flight, and emitting energy blasts through her Wasp sting, are undeniably formidable, yet individually they might be classified as street-level powers. In the presence of iconic figures like Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man, few anticipated that the Wasp would rise to prominence within the team's ranks. However, the Wasp defied those expectations in remarkable fashion. She achieved the distinction of becoming the first woman to lead the Avengers ever, a feat that astonished her teammates and fans alike. Her years of experience endowed her with wisdom and capabilities that far exceed the sum of her individual powers. The Wasp's mastery of her abilities, coupled with her intelligence and resourcefulness, transformed her into a formidable hero who surpassed the expectations of everyone who had ever underestimated her. And finally, in at number 1 today is Protector. Novar, also known as the Protector, is an extraterrestrial figure who carries a bit of a renegade reputation. In a remarkable display of his power, he once took down both Thor and Captain Marvel simultaneously, an impressive feat by any measure. However, it's worth noting that many readers may not be familiar with the character of the Protector, as Novar has gained more substantial recognition among fans as Marvel Boy, particularly through his involvement with the Young Avengers. Hailing from Earth 200080 as a Kree super soldier, Novar has since laid claim to the vast universe of Earth 616 as his own. His unique set of powers include, and I'm not joking, explosive fingernails, psychedelic saliva, wall-crawling abilities, heightened senses, and a remarkable conscious control over various bodily functions, among other powers. Novar's prowess in combat is truly formidable, a trait that certainly captured the attention of his teammate turned lover, Hercules. In shedding his Avengers affiliation and the Protector moniker, Novar has found his true calling and thrived as a member of the Young Avengers, the West Coast Avengers, and has even transitioned into the role of an interstellar diplomat and a Guardian of the Galaxy.
Number 10, Dupe. Dupe is one of the X-Men who is known for being pretty ridiculous, and as such, a lot of people do not take Dupe seriously. At all, which also extends to Dupe's power levels. However, I would argue that Dupe is actually one of the most powerful X-Men ever, who is simply grossly underrated due to his nonsensical appearance and depiction. Dupe has powers that allow him to influence the emotions of others, perform magic, resurrect, travel in the liminal space between comic book panels, shatter the fourth wall as he pleases, and honestly, so much more. I think perhaps this is the reason, in fact, that he doesn't appear as often in the comics, and therefore isn't isn't as appreciated for his powers by fans. He's just too crazy. He's just too powerful. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd and you love it when we talk about X-Men, I know I love it, be sure that you click that subscribe button, ring that bell so you do not miss out whenever we are talking about all the X-Men goodness. Number 9, Tempest. Tempest could literally undo anyone in the blink of an eye, like she did with Matthew Malloy, who was set up to be pretty much the most powerful mutant in almost all of existence, I would say. His reality bending was honestly off the charts, and yet Tempest was able to defeat him by traveling back in time to make sure his parents never met. Ho-ho. Her ability allows her to create time bubbles in which she can control the flow of time. Her powers earned her a place on Krakoa's Five, a team created for the purpose of handling all mutant resurrections. She can slow or speed up time as much as she wants within the bubbles, and can also use her chronokinesis powers to time travel. Number 8, Juggernaut. Juggernaut, a well-known X-Men antagonist, is widely regarded as one of the most powerful characters in the comics. Even though he is not a mutant, he became a member of the X-Men team after losing most of his abilities due to a dispute with Sidorak and seeking reconciliation with his stepbrother Charles Xavier. Interestingly, Juggernaut managed to form many friendships during his time with the X-Men. When I say that Juggy is underrated, I don't necessarily mean as a powerful character. I think we all know how powerful and dangerous Juggernaut can be. I personally would not want to face him, that is for sure. But when it comes to him as a member of the X-Men, I feel like this is often overlooked and that overall he's a somewhat underrated member of the team in terms of what he brings to it. And I don't just mean in terms of his powers. Number 7, Beast. Beast is underrated on, honestly, a lot of levels, whether we're talking about classic Beast or current Beast, but especially I feel with the current Beast that we have, that guy is downright deadly. Not only was he unable to be reined in by Wolverine, who ultimately ended up killing Beast after Beast had him become his lapdog to be sent out on some of the darkest missions of X-Force, reducing Wolverine to a mere tool used for wiping out perceived threats to Krakoa, but he also perhaps has become even more dangerous after being resurrected. Now we have multiple Beast clones who themselves are working on their own small army of Wolverine clones with the project known as Weapons of X. Number 6, Synch. Synch is only now starting to be fully appreciated by fans around the world, all thanks to his reappearance in the Krakoa era. Synch was one of the people prioritized for resurrection, as he was needed to go on a mission into the vault where the children of the vault had retreated. Considering them and their evolution a threat, the Quiet Council put together a small away team to investigate what was happening inside the vault, sending them out to basically infiltrate it. This is just what Synch, Darwin, and Laura Kinney, then known as Wolverine, currently known as Talon in the comics, were tasked to do. It's here that we got to bask in Synch's rainbow colors, saw the relationship develop between Everett himself and Laura, and where we learned that it might be possible for Synch to even sync with others who are not mutants. We'd also learn in the X-Men series that Synch had evolved to a point that he could remain synced with his fellow mutants even when outside of their range, making Synch possibly one of the most powerful mutants to just have ever existed. Number 5, Banshee. Banshee, simply put, isn't a hero we focused on here on Top 10 Nerd. I can't remember the last time I featured him on a list, and yet he kicks butt consistently in the comics. Banshee's mutant powers turn him into a siren, which oddly enough is the name for his daughter, who shares his abilities, the name that she took up for herself as an active mutant hero. Banshee can use his powers to attack his opponents, fly, see in the dark with sonar abilities, influence and persuade his opponents, and even create shields, all with the use of his amazing voice. Basically, he's like a smaller scale Black Bolt, which means that while Black Bolt, the Inhuman King, gets a ton of love in the comics and outside, other Sonic-based heroes like Banshee's Sean Cassidy tend to fall by the wayside, sadly. Number 4, Chimera. Chimera is the daughter of Storm and likely Black Panther, who hails from the alternate reality 13729. Chimera seems to have inherited the powers of her mother, but also shares a connection to the Earth, which allows her to draw on and harness its energy. She is also a skilled tracker and can communicate telepathically with animals. I'd also assume, as she's the daughter of Storm and of T'Challa, that she is a skilled combatant as well, as while Storm is more well known for her goddess status and weather manipulation powers, she's also an extremely skilled skilled fighter as well, and her dad would obviously be a given inspiration for her as a fighter. Black Panther is well known for his fighting prowess. Chimera may have hailed from Earth 13729, where she was a member of the X-Men, but after being displaced to Earth 616, the main comic book continuity, she also became a member of the X-Men there as well. Number 3. Angel/Archangel. Warren Worthington III is not usually folks' first pick for mutants who are their favorite among those who have belonged to the X-Men team, but it is important, I think, to acknowledge Warren's history with the mutants and consider the fact that he is a legacy member of the X-Men. Warren joined up with the very first roster of the X-Men team to have ever existed, being one of the first members to be brought together by Charles Xavier. Sure, he might have hollow bones, and his powers may mostly involve just flight, but when it comes to flying, Warren has proven in the past that he is one of the best, and in his Archangel form, he is even more powerful. He is also one of the most useful mutants outside of his power set, being an extremely accomplished businessman who tends to be one of the most charismatic members of the X-Men, who since his early days has been popular with the public, helping the team's image. Number 2. Polaris. Polaris is a character who I feel like often gets overshadowed by her dad, Magneto, and yet she too is just as much, or nearly as much I'd say, of a powerhouse as he is. Polaris has had somewhat of a rough go in recent years, especially when it comes to confronting her past and moving forward towards her future. I would love to see more moments like when she joined the X-Men, where she gets her moment in the spotlight. It's well deserved, and Lorna Dane deserves to not have her character sabotaged at every single turn, like has happened to her in some of her past. She's underrated on multiple levels, both as a hero and as a character with some real depth to her. I think it would be really amazing to see her team up with her now considered adoptive sister and brother as well to fight against injustice in the world. I love all the healing we've been doing with this whole family lately, and it would be so cool to continue along that path and see where else it could take us, especially if we bring the family together as a unit. I've seen it happen a little bit in the comics, but I'd love to see more of it. Number 1. Kid Omega. Poor Kid Omega's trope initially with his appearance in the Krakoan era X-Men comics involved him constantly being taken out, as in permanently defeated. But don't let that fool you. Quentin Quire is still a psionic badass who deserves your respect. He is considered to be one of a limited few mutants who belong to the Omega level class, meaning that he has unlimited potential in terms of what he can accomplish. And while being super powerful psionically, he's also super brilliant as well, and can actually think faster and at a higher capacity than even other extremely powerful and skilled Omega level telepaths. Quentin joined up with Logan's X-Men and has been shown to be a potential future Phoenix in Wolverine and the X-Men issue number 42.
Coming in at number 10 is Ace the Bat Hound. Of all the Bat family pets, Alfred the Cat, Bat Cow, Titus, Ace came first, and he wasn't just another pet of Damian Wayne. Not that there's anything wrong with that, I'm just saying. Now, Ace seems to be a name shared by many dogs who have worked with Bruce Wayne and his companions. When he first appeared in Batman number 462 in May of 1991, Ace was a shepherd type doggo, and that's been the most popular breed for Ace the Bat Hound, usually a German shepherd. But he was also a mastiff for a long while as well, with no real explanation. The most recent and popular German shepherd Ace the Bat Hound was an attack dog for the Joker and was not treated very well. Luckily, this very good boy was taken in by Alfred and the Bat family, and he became the bestest Bat boy ever. Yes, he did. Number 9, Batwoman. There have been a few different Batwomen over the years, but the one who will always stick in most fans' minds would have to be Kate Kane. Now, just to be clear, this is Batwoman we are talking about and not Batgirl. As a child of military parents, Kate has a soldier's mentality which just adds to her amazing fighting skills. She has cultivated over the years, not to mention a deep, intense desire to be the best she can be always. She received training from the Green Berets, Navy SEALs, and Special Air Service, and the villain Shadow also helped to train her to become a better hero. Following Batman's disappearance after the Infinite Crisis, Kate Kane assumed the Batwoman mantle and stepped in to become Gotham's protector. Kate has even displayed some superpowers. At one point, an injury left her able to detect electromagnetic fields, and in the Future Imperfect storyline, she even became a vampire. Number 8, Bluebird. I think Bluebird, or Harper Row, is looked over quite a bit when we talk about the Bat family, and honestly, it's kind of understandable. She did actually step down from her hero mantle in order to get her electrical engineering skills accredited, which honestly, that's the most real-world reason reason for someone to stop being a hero, but it was probably the smart thing to do because Harper Row here is a whiz with electronics and electrical engineering. She's used her natural aptitude to help both her and her brother survive, as well as assisting Batman multiple times without him asking, improving upon some of his tech and helping out Red Robin on a few occasions using her homemade advanced tools. She's actually very cool, in my humble opinion, in her brief time being around. Number 7, Duke Thomas. Now I feel like this might bother a few people, but honestly, this young blood still has to prove himself in my eyes. There is absolutely no doubt he is powerful. As one of the only meta-humans on the Bat family roster, he's already naturally a cut above many others, but there are so many more that could bring him down without even needing superpowers. Powers don't always equal superiority on this family. Speaking of his powers though, Duke wields ghost vision, which he uses to perceive people and moments in the past and in the future. He also wields a cosmic awareness that extends into other realities and has even used the ability to travel across dimensions by light and shadow. Now he originally started as part of the We Are Robin movement, but left and ended up making it on his own. Batman then took him in, helped train him, and then sent him out to be a part of the new Outsiders team alongside Black Lightning. Number 6, Lucius Fox. There are a few people without which Bruce Wayne would not be where he is or be able to do the things that he does. Among this very select group would be Lucius Fox. First appearing in 1979, Lucius was the second in command at Wayne Enterprises. He is an incredibly adept businessman known throughout the world, but he is also, privately, Bruce Wayne's business manager, financial executive, and, not to mention, armorer. And if that weren't enough, when Bruce Wayne decided to resign, Lucius was promoted to CEO of Wayne Enterprises and the Wayne Foundation. His power definitely comes from the power of the company, his connection to Bruce, his sons, Luke and Jace, who is not a member of the Bat family, surprisingly, and he also does have a military background, so there is that if he's ever in like a little scuffle. It turns out that in DC, power isn't only about how big your muscles are. Number 5, Batwing. Luke Fox is not the first Batwing, but for a lot of us, he is definitely the coolest one. Being the son of Lucius Fox, Luke is a tech genius, graduating a year early with 2 degrees from MIT. His tech prowess really aids him as he has an incredibly advanced suit of armor that does a lot. For example, the suit has a full faceplate, retractable cape, and an interior skin that monitors vital signs and enacts first aid, like hardening around broken bones to hold the bone in place and administering painkillers. It gives Luke a form of invisibility, detective vision, holograms, it can access the GCPD computers, features gyroscopic assist, a terrain map, shock charges, a kinetic patch, anti-personnel plates, and just so much more. This is on top of Luke's training as an MMA fighter before his Batman training. Unfortunately, he just hasn't received a chance to shine in the spotlight yet and primarily works as a supporting character in most Bat family storylines. Number 4, Stephanie Brown. I feel like there are a lot of mixed feelings on Stephanie Brown out there. She has had an interesting history as a member of the Bat family. Originally, Stephanie fought against her father, the villain Cluemaster, under the vigilante name Spoiler. She would usually fight alongside Tim Drake Robin, and they had a bit of a relationship going on the side. Now, Batman eventually trained her up some, and when Tim was forced to step down, thanks to his own father, Stephanie even took up the title of Robin. But this was pretty short-lived, as she actually did not make a very good Robin, constantly disobeying orders and pursuing criminals on her own, which eventually led to her downfall. She ended up in the hospital, and it was really questionable if she would even pull through. Luckily though, she did survive and even went on to succeed Cassandra Cain, becoming the 3rd Batgirl. Now, the two of them, Cassandra and Stephanie, are the duo known as the Batgirls. Number 3, Huntress. Like a lot of the Bat family superheroes that we have already talked about, there have been a few versions of Huntress. The original was Helena Wayne, the daughter of both Bruce Wayne and Selina Kyle, and that character was loved. Unfortunately though, that character belongs to what is known as Earth 2, which is essentially the world of the original DC heroes, but she has not remained the Prime Earth's Huntress. Instead, we now have Helena Bartonelli. Well, sort of. We also have a Helena Wayne, but she's from an alternate future of Prime Earth. Are you confused? Because so am I. Let's just talk about Bartonelli. The only surviving member of the Bartonelli crime family, Helena has dedicated her life to a vendetta on crime after her family was wiped out by being a part of said crime. She was actually incredibly ruthless, very much willing to take the lives of criminals, which brought her and Batman to odds on a few occasions. But with that famous determination, Batman was eventually able to sway her way of thinking just a tiny bit. She was also done really well in the Birds of Prey movie, so definitely check that out if you haven't already. Number 2, 2, Azrael. Another hero title with multiple bearers. This time though, it's a little different. The title of Azrael belongs to the chosen warrior of the Sacred Order of St. Dumas, cloned and enhanced, subconsciously trained and conditioned, and raised to be a perfect soldier. The most famous, and the one I'm going to talk about today, is John Paul Valley. Once he became Azrael, Valley had encountered both Bruce and Alfred in Switzerland, saving them and actually abandoning his own order for Bruce Wayne's moral values, and he went back to Gotham with both of them. He impressed Bruce Wayne so much within his time that when Bruce eventually had his back broken by Bane, it was Valley who Bruce chose to continue the Batman name. Fortunately, this didn't go too well, as he lost his grip on reality and fell from grace. But he is an incredibly cool and capable character who has arguably gotten much better on the more recent Prime Earth. Number 1, Ghostmaker. Minkoa Khan, Ghostmaker, is essentially Bruce Wayne's rival from his formative years into becoming Batman. Kind of like how in Pokemon games you always have a rival who you hate but kind of respect because they always challenge you and help you improve. Ghostmaker trained with a large number of the same mentors that taught Bruce Wayne, and it's arguable that Ghostmaker is actually equal to Batman. The difference between the two is mainly in ideologies. For starters, Ghostmaker is kind of a psychopath. Bruce Wayne is not exactly psychologically sound, but he has a strong moral code, whereas Ghostmaker fights crime as if it's a kind of sport, and he has absolutely zero qualms with taking someone permanently out of the picture. Operating mostly in Southeast Asia, he constantly tried to get Bruce to see things from his point of view, which eventually led the two to agree to just stay out of each other's way. This guy is very much rated, but for most fans of Batman, learning about Ghostmaker will come as a surprise.
At number 10 is Tigra, a superhero who's basically a giant talking cat. Tiger. Personally, I'm a dog person, so it's easy to see why Tigra would be so underestimated. After all, she's hardly the most well-known feline superhero out there. Nevertheless, she's got all the cool feline powers: razor-sharp claws, agility like you wouldn't believe, and a tail that's more than just for show. All pretty generic, but there's one moment in the comics that truly made her stand out. See, Tigra once took down a Skrull who had all the powers of the Fantastic Four combined. Yeah, we're talking about a Skrull with stretchy abilities, fire powers, rock-hard strength, and invisibility. Like, forget the Fantastic Four, this dude was fantastic on his ones. And Tigra, she outsmarted and outpaced this Super Skrull in a face-off. Even when the Skrull had a speed boost from the Human Torch's fire, Tigra showed that she's the real speed demon here. Now, even though Tigra doesn't always hog the spotlight like some of the other big names in the Marvel Universe, she's still an Avenger, so while Tigra might not be on everyone's superhero lunchbox, she's definitely got the skills and the guts to hang out with Earth's mightiest heroes. At number 9 is Sunspot. Roberto da Costa, aka Sunspot, isn't your typical superhero. Not only does he have the whole rich guy thing going for him, but his powers are seriously cool too. He's basically a human solar panel able to absorb energy and turn it into super strength. Now, the moment when he faced off against the Red Hulk was legendary. Going toe-to-toe with a Hulk takes some serious guts. Sunspot's determination and his solar-powered might were on full display here. He launched a punch so strong, it actually drew blood from the Red Hulk. That's like leaving a dent in a brick wall by punching it. It's basically unheard of. Now, what makes him even cooler is the dude typically holds back from unleashing his full fury. In fact, he barely ever needs to throw punches at all. Sunspot usually relies on his charisma and brains instead of flaunting his powers. But when he does decide to unleash that solar strength, watch out, because there's a lot more to him than just his hefty bank account. If you're enjoying this video so far, please support the channel by pressing like, subscribing to Top 10 Nerd, and ringing that notification bell. At number 8 is Reptile. Reptile is a hero with some seriously cool but kind of underrated powers, transforming into dinosaurs. Like, you're in a fight and bam, you can morph into a T-Rex or a raptor, and that's pretty much Reptile's shtick, and it's super awesome. But what's even cooler is that it's gonna take a lot more than a flimsy extinction rock from space to take this dude down. Like, you thought meteors were scary? Try surviving a nuclear blast. Yeah, you heard that right. Apparently, that's where Reptile really shines. At Avengers Arena number 18, this guy survives a direct nuclear explosion. He walks out of it without a scratch, no radiation poisoning, it's not something that just any superhero can boast about. Like, even big shots like Namor were impressed. But handling those dino forms is also quite tricky business. He risks losing control every time he switches into a dinosaur, which adds a hefty dose of risk to his superhero game. So while Reptile might not be headlining Marvel movies or comics, surviving a nuclear blast speaks volumes about his toughness. I mean, turning into dinos might not be as flashy as shooting lasers, let's say, but hey, he's got a serious resilience. Definitely a hero worth giving some more credit to. At number 7 is Speedball. You know, Speedball might not be the first hero that comes to mind when you think of Marvel track stars, but this guy has an incredible story worth talking about. See, back in the day, he was part of the New Warriors, a team that wasn't exactly grabbing the headlines like the Avengers or the X-Men. In fact, his team ended up becoming a bit satirical, with its final incarnation taking the form of a superheroed reality show, which doesn't quite sound so serious. But here's the thing, leading up to Marvel's Civil War, things got super serious for Speedball. His team faced off against this bad guy named Nitro, and let's just say they underestimated him big time, seeing as they may have been a bit more occupied with their show's ratings than actually taking down the bad guy, which was a major mistake. Nitro set off this insane explosion in Stamford that wiped out the entire city and everybody on the scene except for Speedball. Can you imagine? 600 people gone in a blink of an eye, including all of Speedball's superpowered pals. But this guy, his powers that involve bouncing around and soaking up energy, somehow managed to survive. At number 6 is Mimic. This guy's got the wild mutant ability called Power Mimicry, which means he can copy the abilities of not 1, not 2, but up to 5 different superhumans all at once. It's like having a superpower sampler platter. And it gets even crazier. Mimic isn't limited to just mutant abilities, because he can also mimic non-mutant powers like those of the Fantastic Four. Plus, after hanging out with these superpowered folks for a while, he can consciously switch up and choose which abilities to use on command. In Exiles number 14, Namor the Submariner is on a conquest to claim Latveria, and who steps up? None other than Mimic himself. And these two heavyweights go at it for nearly an hour, and ultimately, Mimic wins, not only taking down Namor, but a whole army of Doombots all by himself. Some serious superhero muscle right there. As a member of an alternate universe Exiles team from Earth 12, he doesn't nearly get the same recognition as Earth 616 heroes, but it doesn't make him any less powerful. At number 5 is Nova. Sam Alexander is the second incarnation of Nova, taking up after his father after discovering the Nova helmet and using its powers to protect the galaxy. At face value, he sounds kind of generic, especially with his supernova strength and speed, especially since he's overshadowed by his dad so often. But Nova is arguably much more powerful because the kid just can't seem to catch a break. In the final issues of Avengers vs. X-Men, he goes toe-to-toe with Cyclops. And if you think that's impressive, wait till I tell you that Cyclops was imbued with the Phoenix Force. And believe it or not, this kid freaking won. That's like a David and Goliath moment right there. At number 4 is Aurora. Ever heard of Aurora? She's this awesome super fast hero with some seriously underrated powers. Sure, her twin brother Northstar gets a lot of attention, but Aurora's abilities are top notch too. In a scene from X-Men number 191, Aurora and Northstar casually destroy X-Mansion, showing off their immense powers. But when Northstar's gotta take a moment to catch his breath, Aurora just doesn't hold back and goes on the brink of wiping out the whole mutant crew single-handedly. She was a hair away from total domination. Now the thing is, she's got it all, speed, flight, and control over light, yet she's often sidelined compared to her brother. It's like everybody's sleeping on her massive potential. At number 3 is Speed. Speed, also known as Tommy Shepard, might not be on the A-list like Iron Man or Spidey, but he is seriously impressive. You see, Speed isn't just any speedster. He inherited his uncle Quicksilver's velocity, which automatically makes him one of the fastest folks in the Marvel universe. As one of Scarlet Witch's 2 sons, he often gets overshadowed by his brother Wiccan. Now, obviously, Wiccan's powers are a lot more versatile, given that he does all things magic and Speed just kind of runs fast. But don't get it twisted, Wiccan's magic ain't got nothing on Speed's, well, speed. Why, you ask? Well, you see, Wiccan can teleport. Now, one would think that means he could outpace his brother, and that was put to the test in Young Avengers Presents number 3, where the two brothers raced against each other. Speed did the unbelievable, outpacing his teleporting brother in a race. Imagine that, outrunning somebody who can spontaneously manifest from one spot to another in an instant. That kind of speed is insane. It's moments like these where you wonder why Speed doesn't get more recognition. He's got the speed, the skills, and definitely the power to shake things up in the Marvel world. At number 2 is Tempo. You know, Tempo might not be the first superhero that pops in your mind when you think of Marvel, but trust me, she's one of the most badass time manipulators in the game. She used to hang out with the Mutant Liberation Front, rocking that iconic bullet-headed suit, but things got real interesting when she joined Krakoa. Suddenly, she had a shot at being a part of the X-Men crew, and that's when folks started noticing her. But the moment when Tempo truly proved herself came in the the Marauder series. Until this point, Tempo was only known for slowing or stopping time, but here, she doesn't just stop time, she flips it like a pancake, sending time backwards by billions of years. Yeah, that's right, billions with a B. It's telling me that her first time traveling, she accomplished a feat of such magnitude that most other time travelers couldn't even dream of. This isn't your average hero, she's like the time-traveling wizard of the Marvel Universe. I mean, sure, she might not have the same spotlight as other time travelers like Kang, but Tempo is proving herself to be a powerhouse you definitely don't want to underestimate. At number 1 is Hellion. Imagine facing off against one of the toughest superheroes out there, the Hulk. Yeah, Sunspot isn't the only one who stood up against the giant. Enter this dude. Despite being a young hero, he pulled off something insanely epic. In a comic called World War Hulk X-Men #1, he did the unthinkable. Using his telekinetic powers, he locked the Hulk's fist, giving his team a chance to regroup for battle. Yeah, you heard me right, y'all. A teenager managed to hold back the mighty Hulk's fists with his mind. Now obviously that didn't last forever, but just managing to hold back the strongest force in the multiverse? Come on now, this guy should be a superstar. Now he might not be as famous as some other Marvel heroes, but he's proven he's got some serious skills. Surviving tough situations and facing off against baddies like the Hulk shows he's definitely one to watch in the underrated superhero league.
And at number 10 is Lifeguard. Lifeguard, or Heather Cameron, arguably has one of the most useful mutant powers possible. Her ability is called Danger Detection Response, and basically what it means is that she can detect danger to her or others' lives in her vicinity, and she can literally evolve whatever powers are necessary for her to stop those lives from being lost. She can gain more than one power at a time and is able to control said power after just a few seconds. It also seems to be kind of limitless in what she can do. Her situation biomorphic adaptations have taken the form of growing wings for flight, extra arms for carrying, and super strength, her skin turning into a sort of golden metallic super awesome armor, gills for underwater breathing with her legs even turning into a fishtail for better swimming ability, as well as her simply upping her strength level from normal to superhuman. It's almost too fitting that she was an actual lifeguard before her powers emerged, because she's a literal lifesaver. Number 9, Mantis. Mantis actually got her start in comics when she used her abilities to reform Swordsman or Jacques Duquesne, which actually got her into the Avengers. Mantis's powers and abilities are more than what you may have gathered from her film counterpart. Mantis has complete control over her body, which in turn gives her peak human agility, the ability to accelerate healing through force of will, and an empathic nature enabling her to communicate telepathically with and sense the emotions of others as psychic vibrations. She can also control her heart and respiratory rate and blood flow. Her mastery of the Kotati priest's martial arts, which focuses on the manipulation of nerve endings and pressure points, has enabled her to knock out beings as powerful as Thor, and her telepathic and empathic abilities are improved upon thanks to the 2 antennae she has coming out of her head. Right here. She doesn't stop there though. Mantis also gained abilities when she merged with the Kotati, such as being able to communicate with both plants and animals and survive in space in a physically solid energy form. She can transfer herself from plant life to plant life across interstellar distances or dimensions, creating a new body from the plant life wherever she ends up. She can transmit and receive telepathic impressions, she has precognitive powers, and more recently she can fire powerful pyrokinetic energy blasts, form energy shields, communicate directly with cosmic beings like eternity and death, and completely control her personal energies as well as her physical form. All this to say, don't sleep on Mantis. Number 8, Sage. Sage is a super genius with a brain more powerful than any computer in the world, granting her perfect memory and rapid analytical abilities. She can come up with the perfect plan in an instant, learn just about any skill without having to practice, remember everything she's ever experienced, perform multiple tasks at once by allocating a partition of her brain to each task, and thanks to training with Professor X, she can engage in telepathy. Her telepathic abilities specifically allow her to detect minds and read them, project thoughts, astral projection, cast realistic mental illusions, and she even has a kind of psionic defense unique to her called her firewall. But it doesn't even stop there, as Sage even has some biokinetic abilities as well, including reading another mutant or person's genetic code and DNA, being able to literally see who someone's related to, jumpstarting latent or enhancing current mutant abilities, and has complete control over her physical body, being able to expel nanobots from her body by controlling her immune system, almost like highly advanced antivirus. She needs more time in the spotlight, just like Mantis. Number 7, the Living Swarm. Okay, so there are a few characters out there in comics who can turn into or are made up of things different from you and I. One of the more interesting of those things would be bugs. Characters like Marvel's Swarm, who's made up of a huge number of bees, or Spider-Man and Carl King, who are literally thousands of super spiders who take on the form of a human being. It may be the stuff of nightmares to a lot of us, but the ways in which this ability comes in handy are kind of incredible. Obviously, having a form that can split apart or move to take on different shapes is incredibly useful for getting into places you're not supposed to be, turning yourself into useful items, being basically intangible, or being able to terrify pretty much anyone. But for Carl King and Spider-Man specifically, their consciousness is actually spread throughout the swarm, allowing them to achieve a kind of rudimentary form of possibly immortality, as only one single spider needs to survive for the entire swarm to be remade and just carry on living. Swarm, being made up of thousands of bees, can even fly through the air, and his powers allow him to control other bees to add to his swarm and grow to bigger sizes. The only real issues would come in the form of bug spray and insecticides, but at that point you can't really do much, so there you go. Number 6, cartoon physics. This ability is definitely a unique one, and one not used too often, and for an understandable reason. It is basically unbeatable. Characters like Batmite and Mr. Mxyzptlk, Captain Carrot and the Zoo Crew from DC Comics, and Deadpool, Impossible Man, and Spider-Ham from Marvel Comics all have some kind of varying degree of this power, not to mention the completely insane character of the Mask. It's hard to explain exactly how this power works or what it even technically is. For someone like Spider-Ham, for example, he's able to become more cartoony the more danger he's in, which kind of lets him and others like him just take a hell of a lot more punishment without being hurt too badly. Characters like Batmite and Mr. Mxyzptlk actually just completely warp reality, usually in comical and cartoonish ways. Like I said, it's all hard to properly explain, but these characters can creatively turn almost anything into a weapon, they can eat an ungodly amount of anything, detach their body parts, spin like tornadoes, create traps and allies out of what looks like ink, they can deflate or inflate, they can manipulate the weather based on their emotions, talk to animals, be talking animals, have a great sense of humor, and almost always they break the fourth wall. Actually, being aware of the fact that a character is actually in a comic book is usually a good indication that they have some kind of cartoon physics abilities. And if you really think about it, this ability kind of gives these characters a kind of godhood in comic books. Number 5, living sand. Sand. Yes, it's coarse and it's rough and it does get everywhere, but sand is just millions of tiny rocks, and as such, it can be very strong while also being almost liquid in its composition. Obviously, the obvious choice for examples here would be the Spider-Man villain Sandman, who has been a pain in the backside and occasionally an ally to Spider-Man using these abilities. But there's also the mutant Dust from Marvel Comics as well, who can transform herself into an explosive cloud of sand-like silicon, allowing her to reform her body at will or maintain an aerial-based sand form in the shape of her human body. Clayface from DC Comics is even a character that I think sort of falls into this category, but then we aren't really talking about sand anymore. But if we want to talk manga, there's even Gaara from Naruto, and he'll really show you how powerful sand can be. It's actually kind of scary. Sand can crush, blind, bury, dehydrate, drown, and even erode opponents, which is an absolutely terrifying thought. Number 4, technopathy. Just like the last point, there aren't many characters with this power since it's pretty OP in our modern world. DC's Cyborg and Brainiac, Marvel's Apocalypse, Ultron, or even the mutant Hijack are just a few of the comic book characters who have tapped into the powers of technology, and with it, they were able to bring some of the most powerful heroes and villains to their knees. Technopathy is the ability to psychically perceive and interface with technology, and while the use of the power varies from individual to individual, it allows the user to perceive the location of mechanical devices, physically perceive structure and function of those devices, activate or deactivate power for electronic devices, communicate with and command said electronic devices, and even psychically channel their perception or consciousness through electronic media at will, effectively gaining a sort of pseudo-immortality, just like being a living swarm or being living sand. With the world becoming more and more technologically dependent, this ability just gets more and more useful. Number 3, Forge. Forge has been an important member of the X-Men and mutant community for a long time, but for some reason he always seems kind of unused to to me. He's almost like the X-Men's version of Q from James Bond, but not really. His mutant ability is that he is an intuitive genius. He can visually perceive mechanical energy, quote unquote, in action. Like, he can just understand how something works by looking at it, as easily as breathing. This power allows Forge to instinctively know and understand the potential and functional operations of any machine or technology device in his visual range. A skill that, combined with his natural intelligence, allows him to conceive, design, and build mechanical devices and operate, modify, and disassemble existing technology or create countermeasures for it. It's almost hard to explain how this power is a power, but it is. It's allowed him to subconsciously invent and construct something where someone else would have to actually think about it, design it, and then create it. He's been able to just make it and then deconstruct it later to figure out how to improve it. He's created cybernetic systems, sophisticated holograms, and elaborate computer and fiber optic systems, as well as time travel devices. His potential is vast, and that's before you take his magical affinity into account. Number 2, stretching. Elasticity and plasticity, the ability to convert the mass of an entire body into a highly malleable state at will, is an ability that has many more applications than you think. This ability is shared by Martian Manhunter using his shapeshifting ability from DC. There's also Plastic Man, and then of course Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, who is probably the best known hero with powers of elasticity. He has been able to use these powers to absorb or redirect the impacts of bullets or explosions, stretch his limbs to distances of 1,500 feet, and for shapeshifting, it's allowed him to do so many different things: entangling, imitating, parachuting, gliding, cushioning, slingshotting, bouncing. He can do all of it, being able to go as thin as a sheet of paper or as narrow as a needle, and even turning himself into a liquid solid state. But it goes even further. He could even mold himself to the shape of something like a key to unlock a door. Basically, this power has a lot of uses. And finally, in at number 1, Multiple Man. Multiple Man has such a crazy interesting power. Jimmy, or James Madrox, is actually a changeling, which is sort of a genetic precursor to Marvel's mutants, who gain their abilities at birth instead of having their X gene activated later on. For James, his power is that of duplication. He can duplicate himself multiple times upon impact, and each of his dupes can create one single dupe of their own. One of the real benefits of this power is that the Prime Madrox will retain any memories of his dupe's experiences. So, let's say you had to read like 10 books in a week. Well, you could have like 10 dupes all read one book each, or you could have like 20 dupes each read half a book. And then when they re-merge with you, you have all of their memories of each book that they just read. Multiple Man is like an information gathering powerhouse, but he can also use the ability to learn skills. Like, one of his dupes trained as a Shaolin monk and trained in meditation. One was trained as an EMT. One audited an autonomy class for like 6 months. One passed the New York bar exam, and one claimed to be the world's greatest detective. Stuff like that. In his self-titled comic from 2018, he even goes into a future world that is completely ruled by Magi, which is the plural for James's dupes. I'd love to see his potential shown in the MCU or something, but he's just kind of so underrated that I don't think it would happen.
Number 10, Kang the Conqueror. While the future of Kang in the MCU is extremely uncertain, with Jonathan Majors being removed from future projects, the fact remains that in the comics, Kang is an extremely underappreciated villain. This is likely because not as many modern comics fans know how deadly Kang can be. If you are more a fan of the MCU, or if you are more of a modern day comic book collector and reader, you might have missed out on some of Kang's most epic stories and most deadly moves when it comes to him facing the Avengers. Although I will say that comics have been hinting at his power in recent years, if you know where to look. Kang is typically an Avengers villain. While he might look ridiculous on paper, many of us comic book fans know to respect him, as Kang is a master of time who has defeated an insane number of Avengers across the multiverse. I'm not as worried for the character's future in the MCU, because the other cool thing about Kang is that he's a time traveler, and as a result, he has many different looks and identities through the years. So it's possible that he could actually be anyone hiding in disguise, laying in wait for the right moment to reveal himself and strike. And friends, before I move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not show us you love us by clicking that like button. Number 9, the Lizard. The Lizard is a villain who often gets overlooked when it comes to Spider-Man fans. Why is this? Because not many people know just how dark and deadly the Lizard can be. And perhaps because the Lizard's alter ego, Curt Connors, is known for being a good man and a scientist. But that doesn't mean there isn't darkness lurking beneath the surface, even with as well-intentioned a man as Connors. And even without any potential darkness within Connors, the lizard should be dark enough to persuade readers to be intimidated by him and respect him. You also have to think of how terrifying it must be for Connor's consciousness to exist within the lizard when the creature is completely unleashed and fully in control. It's a complete lack of control in a way that is probably super terrifying for Kurt. Number 8. Hunter in the Darkness. The Hunter in the Darkness is an interesting character and one that honestly we do not talk enough about on Top 10 Nerd. And also super complex, to be honest. Villain, sometimes a bit of an anti-hero or an ally to heroes. While Wolverine did once free the werewolf-like being from a trap years ago, the Hunter still remained an adversary of Wolverine. It has been implied in the comics that there is a sense of camaraderie between the two at times. When we first met the Hunter in Darkness, it was made to seem like, and in fact some characters in the issue did think, that the Hunter was actually a more feral version of Logan. Number 7. Taskmaster. Everyone knows that Anthony Masters is insane when it comes to hand-to-hand combat. He has photographic reflexes, which allow him to learn any fight move or style just by observing or battling against someone, which makes him pretty hard to beat if you don't have some kind of crazy superpower set. Taskmaster might not be on anyone's A-list, but he sure has fought a ton of well-loved superheroes, including Moon Knight. Moon Knight himself doesn't have any crazy superpowers, but he does have a Batman-like ability to strike fear into the hearts of almost all of his opponents, no matter how skilled they are, which was really the only thing that made it possible for him to defeat Tony here. Number 6. Chameleon. Chameleon is definitely a hero who deserves more love and more respect, or at least more disdain if you love to hate the greatest villains. He was the first villain that Spider-Man ever faced in his own series. A lot of people don't think of shapeshifters or masters of disguise first when it comes to power levels, but the reality is someone who is really good at disguising themselves as other people can be one of the most deadly and unstoppable villains around. Look at what Mystique managed to do only a few years ago in X-Men's Inferno, or Chameleon in Devil's Reign. Not only is Chameleon great at creating chaos and hurting others by disguising himself as other people, but he also is pretty good at hatching his own plans as well. Number 5. Mystique. Mystique is someone who isn't particularly, or at least outwardly, powerful when it comes to what she's capable of and her power set, and for this reason many people have taken to underestimating her abilities. Here's why I would advise against that. 2021's Inferno issue number 4. In the Inferno series, it's revealed that while Mystique tried to play by Krakoa's rules, when she learned she wasn't going to get what she wanted from Magneto and Professor X, no matter what she did in the name of the Mutant Nation, she decided to take matters into her own hands, as Mystique so often does. I mean, that's why we love her, right? Disguising herself as many different people, she was able to easily ensure that Destiny was in fact resurrected, against the wishes of the heads of the Quiet Council. She also put into motion plans to make sure that Destiny would garner a spot on the Quiet Council, and then she was almost successful in enacting a revenge, on Moira X for keeping her love, Destiny, from her for so long. Mystique here proves that while her power set may have become OP over the years, it's still really her mind and her sense of cunning that makes her honestly so dangerous. Number 4. Mysterio. Another villain that often gets dismissed when it comes to Spider-Man's rogues gallery is Mysterio. Mysterio is a villain that is all smoke and mirrors and illusions, which makes a lot of folks consider him to be a not so real threat. Still, in the cinematic take on the character, we saw Mysterio almost completely fool the entire world. Or well, even being defeated, he still kind of did. His plan here was to convince everyone he was a hero and win them over to his side, and even despite seemingly dying, I'm still not convinced, he actually still managed to succeed somewhat. In the Old Man Logan universe, Mysterio is also the one behind defeating all of the X-Men by tricking Wolverine into thinking all of his friends were really supervillains, thereby getting him to kill the entire X-Men team and school himself. Yikes. Number 3. Destiny. Destiny is one of those villains that is severely underrated. I mean, most people don't even think of her when they think about Marvel villains. Even when they think about X-Men villains, she doesn't happen to be one of the folks that first comes to your mind. And yet she is one of the most powerful out there, despite being very squishy. Honestly. Even dead, she is somewhat of a threat in the comics due to her previously recorded premonitions. You see, Destiny is the lover of Mystique, and her mutant power is that she can see into the future. The more likely a future becomes, the more she can see that future, and her visions have often been known to be quite accurate. We don't have a lot of characters who can see into the future, and most of them tend to be on the hero side of things that do have that power, so it's interesting to see a villain with such rarely seen powers, but especially when you consider, her alignment. as a villain. Number 2, Madeline Pryor. Of course, I have to include the Goblin Queen. You guys know how much I love her. Anytime I do a list like this, she's one of the first people that comes to my mind and we gotta talk about her. Madeline Pryor is a woman who seems to easily be forgotten and shelved, which is surprising considering how great of a threat she posed in the original Inferno story. Currently in the comics, Madeline Pryor is making a comeback, even going on to lead her own X-Men team, nicknamed the Dark X-Men editorially. Madeline Pryor has threatened the entire world with her dark rituals and demon pacts before, and though often forgotten, she really shouldn't be, considering just how dangerous and how powerful she is. Number 1, the Maker. The Maker is the alternate version of Reed Richards. I've always felt that Richards actually might make a better villain than a hero, and the Maker seems to have been this thought made manifest, living proof of it being so. The Maker initially started out as a hero, leader of the team known as the Fantastic Four. However, in the Ultimate Universe where he hails from, the original Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, his and Sue's future of marital bliss was not as guaranteed. And in fact, after the tragedy of Ultimatum and Sue Storm turning down his marriage proposal, Richards got a different perspective on life, which inevitably resulted in him becoming a villain. In this universe, Reed had a rough childhood, and part of where his villainy started was in turning on his own family. A family that had honestly mistreated him for years. Yeah, in this reality, Reed commits patricide and matricide to get back at his parents. And that's just the beginning of his story as a villain. Extremely counter to his Earth 616 alternate.
Coming in at number 10 is The Spot. First appearing in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man number 98 in 1985, as a scientist working for the Kingpin, Dr. Jonathan Owen was assigned to produce the radiation levels of the Vigilante cloak to find a way to artificially mimic his powers. Working late one night, he succeeded, creating a solid black circular portal. The power used to create said portal caused a blackout, destabilizing it and prompting Owen to step into it and pass out. He awoke floating weightlessly in a dimension that was a place of half darkness and half light that contained a large number of portals, and using the original, he slipped back through to the lab. The portals from the other dimension had adhered to his skin, covering him with black spots from head to toe that were portable space warps, and he decided to become muscle for the Kingpin using these powers. He faced Spider-Man and Black Cat, announcing himself as the Spot, causing Spider-Man to fall down laughing. But the potential of his powers not only defeated Spider-Man just once, but could potentially defeat many other heroes, making the Spot someone you may not want to underestimate. Luckily, he's popped up in the recent Carnage comic, but not for very long. Number 9, Moonstone. Carla Sofin was a not-so-moral psychiatrist who particularly enjoyed manipulating her patients into paranoia rather than actually helping them. So we're already off to a really good start here. This led her to be an assistant of the villain Dr. Faustus, and her manipulative skills only grew under his teachings. This allowed her to get time with Lloyd Bloch, the original Moonstone. She gave Lloyd hallucinogens and persuaded him into giving her the Moonstone and the Kree device that granted him his immense powers, which included 10-ton superhuman strength, super speed, stamina, durability, agility, reflexes, and flight, as well as, thanks to the Gravity Stone, the ability to control gravitational forces, enabling her to move and otherwise manipulate matter, to create force fields, to increase gravity around a target and crush it, to generate miniature black holes, and even to transport objects through dimensional rifts. Now, she's been featured in some big villain teams and moments, but I don't think she's ever really had her own time to shine as a solo villain in a real, tangible way. Number 8, Sin. Sin, aka Cynthia Schmidt, is the daughter of the Red Skull, and as such, she's often overshadowed by her pops. But for a little while, she was actually really cool with tons of potential. She was conceived with the intention of Red Skull gaining a male heir, but obviously, Cynthia is not male, and it almost meant her end if it wasn't for Susan Scarbo, who convinced the Skull to let her raise the child in his place. Eventually, Skull returned and used a machine to both age up Cynthia, but also to grant her superpowers. She was eventually captured and rehabilitated by S.H.I.E.L.D., but that was promptly undone by the henchman Crossbones, and the two of them went on the warpath, resulting in the demise of Steve Rogers' Captain America. Yes, Sin was instrumental in the legit fall of her father's greatest rival. But everything returns to the status quo, so Steve did eventually return and Sin was defeated. Despite all that happening though, she went on to gain control of a mystical Asgardian hammer that transformed her into the incredibly powerful Scotty, which was like the main inciting incident for the Fear Itself storyline. She's a really cool villain and one that needs more time in the limelight. I almost prefer her to her father, as much of a sin as that is to say, no pun intended. She just feels even more ruthless and convincing. I want more sin. It's a weird thing to say. Number 7, Killer Moth. Killer Moth, unlike a lot of the characters on this list, isn't really that powerful. But that's not what makes them underrated and in need of more attention. Killer Moth is just fun. Drury Walker first appeared all the way back in Batman number 63 from February 1951, and his whole shtick is just goofy. While other characters have taken their inspiration from having similar backstories to the Batman, the Killer Moth wanted to be the criminal's version of Batman, so he got himself a moth signal and a mothmobile and the name of Killer Moth. Scary. He even set up a false identity as millionaire philanthropist Cameron Van Cleer. In this form, he became friends with Bruce Wayne, which is interesting. I doubt he knew about Bruce's hobby of Bat cosplay, but meanwhile, he promoted himself to Gotham's criminals using his identity as Killer Moth, giving them each an infrared moth signal to call him to their aid. He didn't really fight for them. Instead, he kind of became the distraction for the authorities so that the real criminals could get away. Do you see why he didn't really become so popular? It's just so hilarious, and although his character has evolved a bit since then, no one has really taken him that seriously, so just like Kite Man, he kinda needs his time to just shine and blossom like a flower. Number 6, Lifeform. Lifeform is weird, I'll give you that, but he deserves so much more attention. The son of a right-wing libertarian, George Prufrock was trained by his father to prepare him for the world. Now, although he wanted to be an actor, his father's training saw George convinced to become a scientist instead, eventually landing a role at Advanced Idea Mechanics. Unfortunately, this meant George was exposed to the pro-gamma virus. This virus mutated George into this grotesque monster with superhuman strength, durability, a healing factor, and he can survive in water and the vacuum of space. But he's literally a mutated monster. Now, as Lifeform, he ended up coming face to face with the Punisher, but also sending Frank running away in fear because his weapons had no effect on Lifeform. Eventually, Frank defeated Lifeform, pushing him into a river, but George came back. Now, with two personalities, one his normal peaceful self and the other being the monster. George now came into conflict with Daredevil, but this time he was more of a confused monster, and eventually, in an altercation with the police, his heart began beating so fast that he collapsed and then dissolved into a puddle. When he reformed, this time he was put into battle against the Hulk by the alien Mercy, who also turned him back into an actual man again. But this wouldn't last, as he remutated and attacked an entire hospital. Eventually, this led to the Silver Surfer taking George to a dead planet destroyed by Galactus and just leaving him there, as he couldn't bring himself to put an end to this dual personality monstrosity. And that's the last we ever saw of Lifeform, and I need to know more. Number 5, Wrath. A young, successful, and secretly entirely evil CEO, Wrath is capable of being both Batman and Bruce Wayne's #1 nemesis and antithesis, and yet almost no one cares about him or even knows about him. Wrath first appeared back in 1984 as basically an anti-Batman, and while that may sound like lazy writing and may make you think he won't be popular, he did it before the major villain Prometheus even ever conceived of the idea. Wrath's parents were two burglars who were accidentally taken from this plane of existence by a young police officer who stumbled on them and thought they were robbing their own house. As you can imagine, this is quite the villain backstory to turn a young Wrath completely against law enforcement. He then decided his whole existence to go against them. Wrath even ended up training a young ward of his own named Elliot Caldwell, who you might have guessed became his version of Robin. Caldwell eventually takes on the role of Wrath himself, filling in his mentor's shoes, and he remained as the villain after the New 52 reboot. And yet, Wrath is nowhere to be seen, and you basically never hear from him. Number 4, Spy Master. While other underrated villains end up going into the direction of being ridiculous or really boring, Ted Calloway, also known as Spy Master, is just plain awesome. Which makes me wonder why the hell he doesn't really get more attention. He has been a thorn in the side of Tony Stark Iron Man for quite a while, and a big thorn at that, breaking into Stark Tower multiple times. In one arc, he was the one who put together a team of other underutilized Iron Man villains and broke into Stark Tower, stealing some of Stark's tech. He was even able to steal tech for Justin Hammer, which was the spark for the awesome Armor Wars storyline. He has eluded capture multiple times and even let the world believe he was passed away while he continued to operate in the shadows. Despite first appearing in 1971, he's just always remained relatively unknown to the common audience member, and I think that's gotta change. Number 3. Manchester Black. What's so funny about Truth, Justice, and the American Way is an incredibly good comic book that sees the arrival of a group of anti-heroes called the Elite that fight crime but in an incredibly brutal way. They cause massive accidents and cause the passing of a lot of innocents while still ultimately saving the day. They take the easy road to fighting crime, and this flies directly in the face of the moralities of one little hero called Superman. The leader of this band of villainous heroes goes by the name Manchester Black, and he has access to an incredible level of telekinesis and telepathy. He was able to punch a hole in mountains, but could also pinch the blood vessels in Superman's brain in order to give the hero the equivalent of a stroke. And with his telepathy, he could combat Martian Manhunter, control a group of elite superheroes, and could manipulate the mind of Superman. He is incredibly capable. But in the story he premiered in, he was defeated rather quickly when Superman partially lobotomized him. And even though he got his powers back and has caused a little trouble here and there, I feel as though this villain should have way more time in front of the spotlight. Number 2. Cersei. Cersei is a bit of a tough pick. On one hand, she isn't underrated at all. She's an incredibly powerful, evil magic wielder, and she could very easily serve as the complete antithesis to Wonder Woman. But on the other hand, she just kinda doesn't. Cersei is a legendary sorceress from Greek mythology. She's immortal and undying, is a centuries-old enchantress with goddess-level powers. She's been on some of the biggest evil teams, but yet she just kind of falls short on most occasions. She was even one of the witch-marked, and I think that's been my favorite of her shows, but even then, she is not the big bad, when I believe that Cersei has the potential to be a whole Justice League level threat all by her lonesome if she was just given the right story. I'm not hugely knowledgeable on her, I'll admit that, so if I'm missing a story where she is given this attention, please let me know in the comments down below. And finally, in at number 1 is Rune, Ultraverse's cosmic energy vampire who fought Conan, Thor, Venom, and Silver Surfer. He's owned by Marvel and Disney, but he cannot be used without permission of the creator, Barry Windsor Smith, so he's currently pretty dormant. Now, Rune began his life as an anthropomorphic-like alien in the Ultraverse before he encountered the magical Starstones. The effects of the Starstones did more than grant him everlasting life. They damned him to live in a horrific and grotesque body, as well as instilling him with a craving for blood and the life force of others that the Starstones required in order to give him power. Following the events of Godwheel, which affected the little-known Ultraverse alongside the 616 universe in Marvel Comics, Thor opened a portal to leave, but Rune jumps into it too at the last second and is transported along with Thor back to Marvel Earth 616. Now, after exiting the portal, Rune encounters and almost takes the life of Powder Keg by drinking his blood, but doing so gives Rune more power and results in him sensing the Infinity Gems, which is then when he went on a one-minded mission to collect them all, which he actually does before they overpower him and the Soul Stone turns him into a shriveled up husk of flesh.